Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this evening for the LEAD org with special guest speaker, Brandon Benzon of Unbreakable Financial Solutions for a workshop on investing made simple. It is October 27th, 2022. We will have an amazing class for an hour with Brandon, who will show us the ropes on how to grow your dough and how to make it simple. Okay, so we are recording this so that those who missed out can watch our YouTube channel. But before I begin, I would like to acknowledge the land that we are on. One moment. As treaties people on Turtle Island, we are obligated to uphold treaties made from a long time ago. Where I am situated, I would like to acknowledge the traditional territories of the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation, the Mississauga peoples, and the treaty territory of the Chippewas of Georgina Island First Nation. I also want to thank the First Peoples for the ongoing teaching of how we are to learn on the land and from the land in partnership with each other, the animals, and the plants. Thank you. So, the agenda for this evening is I will tell you all about our amazing org, the LEAD org. If it's your first time at one of our events, thanks so much for joining us. Welcome. We'll go over our community agreements to engage in the event. This evening, I'll introduce the wonderful Brandon Benzon, and we'll head over to the main event. And we also have a post-event survey. We would love to hear your feedback on what you learned. Okay. So a little bit about the LEAD organization, which actually is a short form for the Canadian Multicultural L.E.A.D organization for mentoring and training. We are a charitable nonprofit community organization that provides mentoring and training for youths and adults, as well as seniors, by assisting them in furthering their education via programs, seminars, workshops, conferences, and meetings, and by helping them access pertinent support groups and resources within the community. And our mission statement is that we give individuals from youth to seniors, which I recently began working with, the support to develop strategies and tools to create their own success stories. And the organization was founded in 2007 by 5 amazing women who really want to give back to the community, especially through mentoring and training. And we actually have one of our directors in attendance this evening. So shout out to Astrid for being one of our leaders and directors. And it's a wonderful organization. And myself, my name is Valerie. By profession, I'm a career development practitioner, and I'm a program coordinator at this org, the LEAD org. And I love providing youth adults who are going through periods of transition with their careers, with career guidance through coaching, workshop facilitation, and one-on-one guidance so that they can go forward confidently in their direction of their dream careers by really helping them hone and own their unique zones of talents. Now, the realm of finances and investments is not my, prime area of focus. I'm no expert in that field. Actually, I have a lot to learn. So I have actually brought on Brandon to talk all about that. So you can learn how you can grow your dough. So a couple of agreements to engage tonight include: please be respectful, be authentic, be open, be present, and be active. So Brandon is available. He's going to make it very interactive. So please be as active as possible so we can have a great experience. All right. So it's my pleasure to introduce the Brandon Benzon. So Brandon Benzon has worked in the financial services industry for over 8 years and does his best to provide value to all 118 of his personal clientele. As the owner and independent consultant of Unbreakable Financial Solutions in partnership with Primerica Financial Services, he has done several community-based workshops with other local orgs, ranging from the Filipino Students Association at York and various nonprofits on the topic of financial literacy / investing for young professionals across the GTA. And if you haven't already started to follow Brandon, you can follow him on Instagram at Benzonite_UFS. Check out his amazing skits and videos, very entertaining. And also investing, which for me is a foreign language, and I'm sure can be for many of you. He makes it super easy to understand. So without further ado, handing it over to Brandon. Thank you, Brandon, for being here. Welcome.
Thank you. And thank you for everyone for taking their precious time and be able to, my commitment to you is to make this as interactive and as well as educational, just leave some sort of nuggets behind this as well. So I'll be able to share my screen and really just get the show on the road. Just one sec. Sorry, technical difficulties. And my co-host, Val?
Thank you.
Yeah.
There you go.
Perfect.
There you go.
Perfect. Sorry, I was just trying to get into my PDF. Sorry, the technical difficulties. Just one sec. This is not showing share screen at the time being. One sec. Oh, apologies.
No worries. Happy to the best of us.
Sorry for the technical difficulties.
Yeah, no worries. In the meantime, while you figure that out, Brandon, we have some new people who joined. So I would actually love to hear a little bit about them because, like I said, it's going to be an interactive experience. So we have Vincent and Amanda that joined. Shout out to Vincent. If you notice the last name is the same, it's because we are siblings. So Vincent, tell us where you're tuning in from and what brought you to this workshop tonight to learn about investing.
Yeah, from Toronto. I'm just tuning in because I kind of want to maybe get maybe some tips or some insight into investing because I've kind of done a lot of the research myself so far and I really started investing in like the past year. I'm kind of in like middle of I guess like I want to be able to passively invest, but also be active at the same time. So I'm kind of in a mix of strategies of like ETF investing, but I'm kind of looking into being a little bit more active when it comes to my accounts. So yeah, that's why I'm here.
Wow, thank you, Vincent. He's the more financially literate of us siblings. So thank you so much for sharing. So can anyone else relate to what Vincent shared? They want to be able to learn how to passively invest and make that one of their sole sources of income. You can raise your hand or give me the little hand emoji. Who else wants to make investing one of their sources of passive income? Okay, Amanda as well. Greg. Hi, Amanda. Thanks for joining us. It's great to see you. All right, so Amanda, why don't you tell us where you're tuning in from and what brings you to the workshop?
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm tuning in from Brampton. The reason I attended this meeting because I wanted to learn more about investments and learn more about different strategies on how to invest. So those are the reasons why I attended this meeting. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Amanda. And so let me ask the audience, like, what are some of the biggest challenges that you have when it comes to investing? For me, it's just demystifying the entire process. Like I've heard of it. I know some friends who, they buy, I don't know, stocks on the Fortune 500 because it's like one of the safer ones. They're explaining to me, it's completely going over my head. But hey, if like, I don't know, 14-year-old kids could do it, right? I don't know. I don't know if anyone here is a 90s. Well, I think there's some 90s kids here too. I don't know if you ever play Neopets. I think that's like kind of where it all began for a lot of people trading. Anyway, I was not one of those kids, so I was not very savvy at a young age about that.
Yeah.
So yeah, what challenges are you having when it comes to investing? So you're welcome to unmute yourself or type in the chat.
Yeah. Okay, so yep. So I think I just said you this out. Sorry for the technical difficulties, right? In terms of I'm actually doing this like on like a little bit more virtual setting. So what we can do, Val, just be able to respond back to the email, and I'll designate you as my professional clicker. That's the way we go about. So be able to see you be able to share your screen and be able to show up like the slides. So yeah. And Jordan did happen to make a point. Having logic over emotions, that's another key thing. Yeah. So when you're ready, Val, just be able to look into the slides and then I'll be able to start there. Yeah.
Yeah, no problem. Well, thank you to Greg and Jordan for sharing in the chat. Not letting emotions take over when investing. Can you explain a little bit more about that, Jordan? Do you find that when you're making decisions about investing, you know, you tend to make emotional decisions, for example?
I guess we could circle back later. So don't worry about it. So there is question and answer afterwards. So I guess we'll just get started. Like for the sake of people's time, we're able to get started on the concept of the presentation. So yeah.
Totally. Okay. We will revisit those topics as we go along. All right. So now it's time to become the professional slide clicker. All right. It's all about teamwork. All right. So just let me know when. Over to you, Brandon.
Awesome. So thank you so much. I apologize for the hiccups, you know, working from home as well. We'll be able to move forward. Obviously, you're getting to know a little bit more about myself and as well as getting to know you as the audience as well. I just want to make sure that this is interactive and educational as well. Maybe there's some things that you probably learned for yourself and you need to be able to have a bit of a refreshment, or maybe some new things you could add onto your repertoire when it comes to be able to learning and investing. So as we go into the next slide. Today's agenda is really just getting to know a little bit more about me in terms of my background and why I got into this industry and my impact towards it. A couple icebreaker questions just to make it interactive as well, if necessary, right? And as well as just the meat of the topic, you know, be able to understand the basics of how the financial literacy that's obviously affecting of people today, right? Of, you know, the recent stats behind it as well, and understand the main concept in terms of successful investment and practices, something I call the EARF analysis, where EARF is nothing more than an acronym as the RRF analysis, basically talking about things like return, risk, and as well as fees, right? Making sure to understand why it's important for investment to grow and double, understanding things such as risk management, and as well as being disclosure in terms of fees when it comes to active and when it comes to mutual funds, passive portfolios, and so forth. We'll also have a little bit of giveaway as well in terms of free giveaway that I have upon your participation, as well as question and answers, right? On top of the fact of as well as other things as well, right? So we're able to move on to the next slide. Right, so obviously just to introduce a little bit myself and how I got into this industry as well. So let's click on the next slide as well. Right, you know, I have at least over 8 years worth of experience and manage over 116 plus accounts. My motivation in coming to this industry is basically seeing other people, much like my friends and family, who didn't really have a proper education and background apart from money management, not actually having the proper advice and resources to make their better decisions when it comes to money management. And that's something that really motivated me to get my licenses in order to make an impact within my overall community, right? And how I've done other seminars to the Filipino Student Association at York, to be able to show that the seminar that I did from there, right? So we called it Sweldo sessions. Sweldo in Tagalog means basically salary and money. So I basically was able to teach a group of other Filipino students there that are either working students or going in their transition of graduating from the post-secondary, going to the workforce as well, right? So obviously getting a little bit of recap about myself, I'd like to get to know a little bit more about you, right? You know, when it comes to really about money lessons, what are some things that you could have been useful that you would have learned on earlier today? What are some money lessons that you could have learned earlier in life that you would have been useful for today? You're welcome to leave any one-word chat in there, whether it be understanding things like stocks, understanding things like investing, and so forth. Welcome to leave it there. If anyone wants to be able to respond back, right? And I think that budgeting, that's also important, right? I agree, Greg. Like, I always view that budgeting is nothing more than mixed martial arts. There's so much formulas that basically go about it. Like, you know, there's things called budgeting to zero and so forth. Yes, TFSA is more than a savings account. I agree. That's very underused, and that's obviously something we're going to talk about a little bit more. And yeah, like just basic things that like people that definitely need to understand that, or maybe you as an audience that want to be able to understand a little bit more for yourself, right? And the next thing that I also like to talk about, or the next question I like to usually ask, right? Yes, not investing in the marketing depths, of course, Jordan. That's another key thing. And I'm probably, this one person is definitely going to score way above 10, right? How financial literate you when it comes towards your investing, when it comes towards investing in overall finances. If you're considered to be a 10, then you're much like my good friend Jordan, who has experience working as an advisor at TD for himself and as well as other people. Maybe you didn't necessarily want to be here, just might be able to refresh. Or if you're under a 10, then thank you for being here at least. And maybe basically you're kind of like other people that I currently dealt with. Whereas, you know, money is not necessarily a basic topic taught in today's world in terms of like proper education, right? So Greg is an 8. That's pretty good for yourself. Anyone that can score between that. I got 8s, 2.5. Okay, Valerie is honest with that as well, right? Anyone else? And any 1 or 2 last responses that we go about 8? Oh, so like this is by far okay. We got a 5, all right? We have some honesty towards there as well. So we have a good bit of balance towards that too. So kudos to those that scored definitely 5 and above, that obviously know their research and talked about basic things and like they know their background behind it. And kudos to you for those that are being honest as well, because to be quite frank, on the next slide, this is an actual statistic that goes about in today's world, right? Whereas as highlighted in the yellow, you're able to see in the next slide, that industry research indicates that more than 50% of Canadians are not investing because of the lack and knowledge and confidence to do so. I'm assuming that people here are above their adulthoods, above like the 1990s and a little bit older, that we've gone through the school system, we've gone through the high school, we've gone through the post-secondary, we've gone through the trigonometry, dot our I's, cross the T's. But whatever happened to a course in adulting, right? That was an optional course. But how much wonders it would do for our current generation from X, Y, and as well as the current millennial generation to actually have this more of a mandate on the course of adulting, right? On being able to teach people of properly investing, money management, just life skills, apart from the theoretical as well. And what's obviously clear in the follow-up point behind that is that Canadian investors need help increasing their financial know-how just as much as they need help building their wealth, right? Because there's a lot of talk that's out there, especially with the rise of like TikTok, Instagram, and social media. You've probably seen these people before, right? They don't necessarily have a license. They have a large following. They're basically to buy the dip and invest into this stock. But is that really valid and actual, you know, legitimate advice, right? Why not start off the basics in terms of having available of the current accounts that we have today, especially in the next slide. Right? And to follow up with it, for most people, they feel kind of confused with investing in terms of where to go about it. But in terms of the next accounts on the next slide, it's just understanding the basics of where to start off with these basic accounts, right? So I put that out for humor's sake, it's okay. Understanding the basics of RRSPs and TFSAs. RRSPs, in my personal opinion, are great for those that make a higher income, anywhere upwards between $50,000 to $100,000 plus. I'll give you a practical example. A friend of mine recently got hired on. Sorry about that. Can you hear me now? Perfect. So sorry about the sad noise. RRSPs are really great for those who make a bit of a higher income, right? A friend of mine's recently got a programming job. His salary was really high, about $95,000. However, as great as the salary was great before taxes, the taxes that he would pay into was roughly around 50 to 20K. So he's walking away about 75, 70,000 at best. An RRSP would be best in his current situation if we were to contribute money into the actual RRSP plan itself. Because for every dollar that's contributed into the RRSP, it's considered to be tax deductible. Think of it in the situation much like my friend. If you're making $95,000, what would you rather get taxed on? Would you rather get taxed at $95,000 or $85,000? Obviously $85,000, right? You want to be able to be able to pay less taxes in terms of like what you make in your taxable income, and contributing to RRSP is beneficial for that in the case that being able to, sorry, one sec. In the case of you being able to contribute to that and save less money, and save a lot more money on taxes when it comes to tax time, right? On top of the fact that being able to have an RRSP is also great in the basics of being able to save for retirement, hence the concept of being a registered retirement savings plan. Whereas money that grows into the actual plan itself is considered to be tax sheltered, right? So if you put $1,000 in an ETF portfolio, mutual fund, stocks, whatever account that is basically put into that type of portfolio itself, if you see that $1,000 go towards $1,500 within that year, obviously the profits are not necessarily taxed if it remains in the RSP itself. The only caveat is that if you withdraw out of the RSP, you get double dinged. One is being able to get charged a 10% withholding charge by the government. And because you receive that money and withdraw out, withdrawals from RRSPs are considered to be taxed as income. So there's a very, very tricky thing to be able to understand when it comes to withdrawing the RRSPs, especially if you're making a high income, much like my friend that got the $95,000 position in his programming job. So it's really beneficial for those if you're actually planning to retire in the long term. You're potentially making a lot less income, or drawing that out and very minimal is something beneficial towards retirement. But there's other usages of having an RSP, especially in the case of being able to save for your first home, right? Let's say if you want to be able to make a down payment of $35,000, right? If you were to basically withdraw that out of that 35 grand the first time, you're able to withdraw that out tax-free for the first time home buyer's plan. So the case that you yourself want to be able to withdraw out for a home, you'll be able to withdraw that out without the consequences of without any taxes for the first time home buyer's plan. And for those that still want to go back to school, you want to be able to have like a different type of like career perspective or just learn something new. There's also the program of the lifetime learning program that is also similar in regards to the first time home buyer's plan as well. The other, sister account that I find that is very beneficial is the tax-free savings account. Very useful when it comes to be able to save for retirement, and obviously your first time investing account in the case if you got your first job. In the case you're making under 50,000, you're a bit of a low to mid salary range, right? And very beneficial based on the fact that profits that obviously grow in the investment, much like RRSP, is considered to be tax sheltered, and withdrawals are considered to be tax-free as well. TFSAs are really great, in my personal opinion, for anything before retirement. Whether the fact that you're trying to save up for vacation, whether you're trying to save another alternative in terms of saving for a house, be able to leave a legacy, and as well as other things towards the long term as well, right? Those are the key things that we do have available in terms of living in Canada, of investment accounts that you can use to be able to help build your wealth in the concept of having proper return. So the next slide. Right, and obviously you're welcome to leave the chat if which one is useful for you, but as well as for the fact of having a difference in an opinion of how, why it's important to invest in these accounts long term in the overall long run. If we were to skip the couple slides, a couple afterwards, Val, right? If you're to put away $10,000 for 30 years at 9% rate of return, hypothetical, right? If you're to put this thing to a similar RSP or TFSA account to average that return, your potential growth for $10,000 for 30 years, $10,000 every single year for 30 years will grow to at least close to at least $1.5 million. Versus the fact that if it was not necessarily into a tax sheltered account like an RSP or TFSA, something known as a non-registered account, the difference is almost half. So having these easy to access accounts, whether it be through a bank, opening a Wealthsimple, or working with a fellow advisor, this is something that is a game changer meant for the sake of long term, especially within a 20 to 30 year plus time frame in terms of building wealth for the sake of your retirement, right? So the next slide that we currently have, and the fact that the way that you look at these type of investment accounts being things like RSPs and TFSAs is they're nothing more than cars. Imagine this: if I was trying to sell you a car, right? It had all the GPS and all the functions and features in terms of playing MP3, Spotify, but it has zero fuel for you to drive. Would you really buy that car in the first place? Of course not, right? And the key factor is that, especially with one point that TFSAs are mistaken to be used as a savings account, but they're really meant for the sake of investment accounts as long as the RSPs. And you can fuel them kind of like driving a car, like gas in a sense, into things like individual stocks, into things like ETFs, into things like bonds, mutual funds, something that is tailored towards your approach and how you want to go about it. right? For the best way to look into is to buy the index, to buy certain portfolios that basically make up a composure of at least 100 different stocks into one. Whereas you as an individual investor, whether things like mutual funds as well as ETFs, has leverage of a professional money manager. These people work hard, legitimately work hard. The amount of seminars that I've been through, I remember as a portfolio manager saying that his day starts at 4 o'clock in the morning and ends at 8 at night. And he's been doing this for 10, 20 plus years of him contemplating of how the market goes, of him understanding of what the best places to understand in terms of statistics, and as well as what to really look out for when it comes to constructing a legitimate portfolio. We're leveraging that from that experience as a regular investor. You have examples of certain portfolios invested into the daily things that we use today. You may have, hopefully that you're a cleanly person, you like to brush your teeth, you like using toothpaste, like Crest, and be able to use Downy, Gillette, and Tide, right? Those are examples of consumer-based stocks where the famous company like Procter and Gamble is a major corporation invested into these products. Maybe you're an animator like myself, so to speak. If you like watching your Disney movies, you may have, there's certain portfolios that exist in towards Netflix, and towards Disney Plus, and so forth, in terms of those big corporations, pharmaceuticals, you name it. And the beauty of these current portfolio-based investments is the fact that they have over 150 stocks put into one portfolio, as shown in the next slide. Right? And you have average of that, and depending on how you invest, whether the fact that you like a specific industry or want to have a more general sense, it really depends on you as an investor, right? So the next slide. To also understand that, why is it important to invest and what does it really mean for you? And to really understand this rule of 72, the rule of compound interest, right? Whereas it's a simple rule to really determine how long it would take for your money to double in terms of years. Let's say, for example, you have $2,000 that you have in the bank, right? Let's say you go to TD, you open up an account of 1%. Well, we'll say 1% for now. Let's say if you want to determine how many years it would take for it to double, you basically do 72 divided by 1. It would take roughly around 72 years for your money to double. Who here is willing to wait 72 years at a 1% return to turn your $2,000 to $4,000? And I see Val's head like doing the oh no, right? Because it doesn't necessarily make sense for the time that you turn to dust for your dollars to double, right? You want to be able to grow your dough, not wait till it molts, right? And if you obviously had a 3% return, if we did the math, 72 into 3% is roughly around 24 years, right? So we show the other examples here as well as we move along with the slides. So the first example at 3% at the next slide, let's say you want to wait 48 years down the road, right? In terms of the next slide as well. And the fact that if you waited 48 years at 3% return and just left $2,000, it would only grow from $2,000 to $8,000 if you waited just 48 years. Who's realistically going to wait 48 years and just retire off $8,000 by the time that you're not working and just retire, right? Doesn't make sense at all. And the fact that we're dealing with a very impactful thing called inflation, right? I swear to God, like I saw gas prices over the summertime, like around 130, and now they're like 173. So imagine 48 years down the road and just having only $8,000 to your name to live off with. That's not necessarily sustainable to live off of for retirement, right? So the rule of thumb is to make sure that you have higher amounts of return to be able to last in the long run, at least higher than the rate of inflation, right? So if you had 6%, obviously the money would double a lot longer, a lot better. And the fact that you have $32,000 in the long run within 48 years versus $8,000, a lot better than the first option, but definitely not necessarily enough to retire off of. You're lucky maybe within a year or so, depending on how you live and how you spend as well. But can anybody guess okay, so I guess we give that away, it's okay, right? But if you had a 12% rate of return, right? Can anybody guess the final dollar amount that's given in the blank slide? Any guesses, whether it be somewhere double or anything like that? No participation, so it's okay. Be able to get things going, right? So 100,000, okay, maybe 100,000, right? If you only had a $75,000, okay, that's a very realistic guess, Greg. Okay, so anybody else? One last answer. Okay, so we'll be able to unveil the answer in today's price. If you had 12% return and you just left it in there for 48 years for the long run, your money will grow from $2,000 to $512,000 without putting any extra contributions. Imagine if you're to put $100 each and every single month, $200 each and every single month, $50 each and every single week on top of that contribution, how much more you would be able to have of, consistently contributing on a daily or on a monthly to weekly basis consistently for investments to grow as well, right? I always say that investing is no different from going to the gym, right? The more repetitions and more consistent you put in, the better the body that you have. The less repetitions that you put in each and every single week, the lesser the body that you're going to wish for. In that sense, investing is no different than going to the gym, right? And it's so crazy of how this rule is not necessarily taught. And it's such a basic rule. You just take 72 divided whatever interest rate your investment is willing to perform at, and it shows how many years it's able to perform. So if you have a good portfolio that at least above 8 to 12%, whether the fact that you're doing yourself or working advisor, make sure it stays consistent within those 10 years of a track record within a portfolio as well. So that's the thing to really understand in terms of investing, because you want to make sure that you work hard to supply the money, but in the eventual long term, money is able to take care of you, be able to invest and save for retirement in terms of wealth building and financial independence. That's the main thing, right? But apart from investing, we always get the usual adage that there's a lot of risks associated with investing. I've always heard conversation from potential clients like, what if I lose every single dollar, right? I even heard one stock tip gone wrong in terms of buying this one pharmaceutical stock that her cousin bought, but didn't necessarily do too good in the long run. So you have to really have a good behavior when it comes to risk. And what I find with risk itself is no different the way that you behave and drive. And the curious question is to ask, what type of driver are you? For the next slide, Val. Right? Are you driver A, kind of courteous, calm, know what they're kind of doing, right? In terms of taking the open road, especially on the 407. Or you're kind of like driver B. That if you feel a bit reckless, don't know what they're doing, listen to anything on TikTok itself. So to be honest, what type of driver are you? Are you more of driver A or driver B, especially when it comes to risk? B. We live in that high life, right? So like, I for people that participate, that's pretty cool, right? Especially living in Ontario. But on the topic at hand, why this is important. Investing is no different than driving. The way that you behave as the type of investor that you are, whether that you range for something that is very low risk, somewhere in the middle, a little bit of growth, or what I like to call equity or aggressive, right? And here's the best ways to weight your overall portfolio in terms of the type of investor that you are, on terms of the next slide. So typically with most portfolios with mutual funds and ETFs, they're typically comprised of these two main factors, stocks and bonds. The best way that I like to make stocks and bonds simple in the function of your overall portfolio is the difference between fridges and farms. If I gave you a mango, where's the best place to store that mango for a snack tomorrow at work? Would you throw that in the farm for the raccoons to take, or would you store that in your fridge? You obviously want to store that in your fridge, right? So bonds are more of a preservative-based type of portfolio in terms of weighting, of being more conservative in a sense. So if you tend to weight more into bonds or to fixed income-based investments or balanced investments, that's meant to be for the sake of preserving your wealth. Don't necessarily see that much return at best, but at least the fluctuation isn't necessarily as much as investing all to stock. So depending on where you weight yourself in portfolio, maybe if you're a little bit more older, and you don't necessarily have that much time to stay off towards like investing for the long term, it's considered to be more low to medium. If you have time in the market, you're in your younger 20s, you're young like myself, then you're able to recuperate that risk depending on how you tolerate risk for yourself from low, medium, high. And obviously the basic question is that, how do you handle risk, right? Are you considered to be low? Are you considered to be medium? Are you considered to be high? That's another thing to also consider. Next slide. Just show an example there. And understand the fact that, although markets fluctuate from time to time, it's just a natural function, the way that it goes in terms of how markets go towards. It's usually stated that within 10 years, 2 periods are typically bad. If we look in towards the recession of 2008 up until 2018, for example, 08 and 9 historically were typically the worst because the mortgage crisis and the recession itself. But afterwards and toward 2010 and forward, we see like the largest rises in terms of a positive, right? Although a little bit dips here in between, we see a lot more positivity in terms of the long term as well. And understanding that the market obviously learns, especially in great crises that happened in the past. Look what happened in the Great Depression, right? Whereas when the markets were still open at the time and stock investing was still such a thing in the early 1930s in those times, right? It took about at least an average of at least 297 months for it to recover. But knowing the fact as time progresses, the market learns, portfolio managers get better with technology, they have a better understanding of how to properly assess and put things forward, right? With the financial crisis, it took about 66 months for the markets to obviously recover from the crisis itself versus 163 days that happened during the time of pandemic. So understanding that, yes, markets tend to fluctuate depending on how your portfolio is weighted, depending on the current situation, the economy itself, and how you're able to persist through. And as the comment that was said before by one of our fellow guests, is to make sure that you have logical control over emotional decisions, right? I always heard from the best topic from Warren Buffett is obviously be fearful when everybody is greedy, be greedy when everybody's fearful. That's another key thing, right? So that's a basic thing to understand when it comes to understanding risk, how you take it and understanding how volatility works, right? So the next slide. And knowing the fact that these services are not necessarily free for themselves, think of yourself as the portfolio manager. You're working 100 hours each and every single week. You don't want to do this for free, right? So there's usually a fee charged based on a percentage. This ranges between 1% to 2%, something called the management expense ratio. Typically with mutual funds, they tend to be a little bit more higher because of the fact that it requires more active and more human workforce to be able to deal with it in terms of administration, taxes, and as well as the overall research behind it. With Valerie's brother, what he mentioned with ETFs tend to be a little bit more cheaper because it requires just copying and mimicking what's going on in the marketplace and a lot more redundant formulas and so forth rather than the actual manpower to actually look into the research of the portfolio. So with things like ETFs and as well as index funds, they tend to be cheaper. Mutual funds, they tend to be a little bit more higher, but depending on how you weight your portfolio and how you stay consistent really determines the return itself, right? So this, as we go into towards the home stretch behind that, next slide. I want to share an example of a client that I helped out with, especially from one of the seminars that I did at York U. So I came across this one lady that had her investments tied up with TD. And during the time of pandemic, she wasn't necessarily too happy with the overall result of her portfolio. Show the next slide. So what happened was that she put away $7,000. So it said book cost. Book cost just shows how much you contributed from the time that you started the investment. Market value is currently what the investment's currently worth. So during the time of pandemic, we were going through a rough time itself, and obviously it lost certain investments. What was also not really convenient for her was the access to service that she had. Even though she had a significant amount of money, she didn't really have that one-to-one service to her in terms of helping her out on the best solutions, questions, and everything in regards that she needed help with. So what I was able to do with her was able to transfer that money out. And now she was able to not only transfer that money out, but put a little bit more within that year and a half. And this is the overall result. Whereas she was able to put away $13,380 within that time frame of just lump sums and periodic investing. And within that, from May of 2020, in a year and a half from that time, she was able to put away $13,000 and was able to grow to about 17 grand. So depending on how she takes her risk, understanding what returns that she can generate for herself, this is what's also possible when it comes to working with an advisor or you having the proper information or research, making sure to grow your dough, right? So in summary, it's also important to look out in your overall perspective of your finances. Investing is great, but what about other areas of your financial life yourself? Especially if you die too soon, would you rather have GoFundMe or actually have a legacy put away? Income protection is something that's so key and crucial, especially the area of life insurance. It's important to do your research apart from that, especially in areas where you get sick. You don't necessarily get benefits from that are covered from work, critical illness, disability insurance, and so forth. The second thing to work on in regards to your financial health, apart from investing, next slide, is developing an emergency fund, having a debt reduction plan, and be able to invest. In my personal opinion, when you have all these things in order in terms of your operations and so forth, you build a proper house and you'll be able to go towards your financial goals and dreams. So
I apologize for the hiccup in the beginning. Hopefully you'll be able to get some sort of, topic or nugget that we're able to walk away with something in terms of the information provided, right? And remember, as I said in this presentation before, the next slide, understand the concept when it comes to research your portfolio, these 3 key factors: making sure that you have a decent return that basically beats inflation within at least 10 years, average of at least 8 to 12%, whether you're invested through index mutual funds and those sort of aspects. Understanding what risk does towards you as an investor, how you behave, how you're able to tolerate, and what type of risk profile that you take, whether you're working with an advisor or currently doing it yourself, and understanding the fees that are involved, especially working with a professional. Do they charge up front? Are they commission based? What are the fees entailed that overall impact your overall return? Risk, return, fees, EARTH analysis, right? So thank you for having me. I know if we'd be able to leave the floor open for questions, and upon your participation, we also included a free giveaway in terms of the investment guide that I like giving. So it hosts a lot of different information about diversification and all those other important things that you can research for yourself, given to your email. I appreciate you having me here. We'll open up the floor for questions and answers. And anyone feel free to follow me on Instagram. Part of my reels is that I play a dumb Filipino uncle that doesn't know anything about money. And I come correct as the nephew to teach them basics about money management. So I do try to keep it lighthearted, interactive, and educational in my content. If you don't have social media, you can also reach out to me by email, my personal email, brandon.benzon@icloud.com. And as well as for the fact that my direct cell 647-828-9130. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Brandon, for leading us through some really important information on how to grow our dough. I love the dough analogy. You want to grow it. We don't want to leave it to get moldy and stale. So now I'm sure there's lots of questions from the audience. So I'd like to open up the floor. If you have any questions for Brandon, you're welcome to either raise your hand using the reaction raise hand emoji, or enter your question in the chat. I actually have a question, Brandon.
Okay.
So you mentioned GoFundMe. Now, this isn't an easy topic to talk about, but when you and I got together to initially, plan this event, you had mentioned that you've seen a lot of stuff on GoFundMe. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
I think it's just, I always go with the adage of that people don't necessarily plan to fail, they fail to plan. And GoFundMe is obviously like a resource that is obviously meant for the sake of if you want to start your own charity, you want to start your own business in that aspect. But there's also a lot of, sad to say, a lot of people that lost a significant loved one and just like that out of nowhere, right? And they have to start with a GoFundMe campaign to do it, right? And as much as depending on how your current status and how well you're known in your community, yeah, you could get the extra $10,000-$20,000, but assessing it sometimes is not as easy. There's even big complaints on the BDB, the Business Bureau, about GoFundMe, about improper service, about actually assessing the capital to use for or be able to have assistance. And I find that it's so much a lot better to have your own personal life insurance plan. Some plans they only charge like literally $1 a day for $100,000 depending on your age and health. Something that I have a personal life insurance plan for myself as well, right? Something that's important now these days, right? And people tend to procrastinate on, and then the GoFundMe around in that aspect.
Okay, so in short, protect yourself, protect your family with insurance, which is another topic we could do another webinar masterclass on, so that if in case disaster strikes, you will be covered.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Yes, that might have to be our follow-up masterclass on how to protect yourself and your family through insurance. Okay. Would love to. Okay. Thank you, Amanda, for the message in the chat. So Amanda asked, if you're starting out investing and looking for a job, what amount is a reasonable amount to start investing? This is a great question.
Okay. So
Also,
I get this a
what
lot.
Steps? Yes.
You don't have to have a lot to start off with. Out of the 116 plus accounts that I currently manage, Amanda, the minimum that you can start off with is no more than 25 a month. Or simple aspect, let's say you have leftover savings of at least about 500. left over, you can be able to start off that lump sum as well. Some accounts like Simple, they don't charge a monthly minimum, so we can put like 5, 10, 20 or so forth, right? Just the minimum you can start off with is 25 a month, or be able to look within your overall budget realistically in terms of what you really afford. So that's another thing. And if you're welcome to connect, like my information is there. So.
Wow, thank you for answering that question, Brandon. That's also a question that I have. Like, it seems complicated, but you don't even need that much to start with. Even $25 a month, you can begin, and you can obviously start to contribute more and more as you accumulate more wealth. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly, right. Because like I said before, investing is no different than going to the gym. If you're starting out, you don't go for the Arnold Schwarzenegger weights. Start with baby. And then until you feel comfortable in terms of adjusting the weight itself, then you start to add on a little bit more as your situation changes. Maybe you get a raise, maybe you get a salary bonus, maybe it's your birthday and you only have those relatives that give you money, right?
Okay, that's good to know. I really like the gym analogy. So we could just gradually build and build and build and invest more as we develop that muscle. And Vincent asks, are bond/bond ETFs viable when one could invest in reliable dividend stocks for monthly income, even when getting closer to retirement?
Yeah, I'm more on the dividend side, Vincent, is especially the fact that based the fact that bonds are very tied to inflation. When inflation's here, bonds are obviously here. and the fact that you want something a little bit more, it's good to balance out, but I consider more of the dividend portfolio.
Great question. Thank you, Vincent. Vincent's been looking out for his retirement early on, which is good. Do you have any other tips about that? Because often, at least me, obviously Vincent's a financially smarter one of us 2 siblings. Would you say it's never too early to start saving for your retirement and investing to grow so you can have a cushy retirement and not be scrambling?
Earlier the better. Sometimes that's not necessarily the case, because I do have clients that are just starting now. And it's especially for people that are currently retiring, I have a client that's in her mid-50s. So she does have a couple of $100,000, but she was able to downsize on the property that she had. She had that excess cash flow that she got from her property that you'd be able to use. If you're a little bit more younger for yourself in terms of retiring early, there is such a movement called the FIRE movement. So literally FIRE is an acronym of financial independence, retire early. The whole concept of it is just to make sure that you have a high paying salary, right? It's just making sure that, whether you're making $50,000, $100,000, that you chunk as high as at least 50 to 70% in terms of the income, and being able to make sure that you have enough stashed away for retirement, right? And another tip in terms of determining your retirement income, it's called the 4% rule. Be able to take whatever income you make, let's say you make 50 grand, and divide that by 4% invest, right? Or depending if working with an advisor, you can be able to whatever software he or she chooses to use, it automatically generates realistic approach to be able to what you need to be able to retire with, and have those resources available if necessary. And we do have 2 more questions asked. Jordan asked, what kind of insurance for someone who is younger or beginning to start a family? Term. So there's different types of insurance products, and I think this would be a good follow-up for masterclass, especially the areas of insurance. I actually started in that field first before investing. Term insurance is something that is a very basic, affordable, cheap type of coverage to start off with. Term insurance is nothing more than just pure life insurance. There's no bells or whistles attached towards it. You basically have a basic coverage, for as long as 5 years, 10 years, or even up towards 35 years plus. Right. The concept of it is meant for the sake of risk protection and risk management, right? God forbid if you die too soon, let's say you have a 30-year term, right? Making sure that if you pass away within those 30 years, you have $100,000 that was given out to you as a tax-free death benefit. If you're willing to start off that term, is the best solution possible. And if you have extra dollars that don't necessarily hurt your overall budget, let's say you're paying $20 or $30 for $100,000 on a term policy for 30 years, you have extra money that you have that you could put out to invest and save, use that as well. Because I believe in the concept of buy term and invest the difference. God forbid you die too soon, make sure you have insurance in place. But God, knowing that you got a little bit more older, make sure you have wealth in place to be able to be self-insured and rely on your own personal wealth as well. My philosophy, right? And the other question that we currently have from Vincent, the general message is that, yeah, I agree, right? And then my additional question was, as a beginner, what few steps could you start with investing? Okay, so then to answer Amanda's question in terms of as a beginner is one, making sure that you have an emergency fund built up first. That's important, right? Making sure that, because like there have been times where, you know, after probing so much questions with so much clientele that like, you know, like, yeah, I'm ready to invest and so forth. But then life happens, they have to withdraw out that investment. So it's very important to know where you're at within your own personal finance, just making sure that you have like a basic cushion of $1,000 saved, have that saved up first, and then decide where you want to go with that afterwards, whether you can afford the $25 a month, whether it's $50 a month, whether you have stable income to do it on a consistent basis, or just want to do it one time as well. That's the best thing to consider. Even before going in the research of like what stocks to invest in and all that type of stuff, where are you with your finances? Where are you in your availability of affordability, right? That's the main thing too. And then you can do your research in terms of what professionals to look out for when it comes to working with an advisor. Are they licensed? Do you have like accreditations like Canadian Securities Course, you know, IROC or basic things like that as well. There's other great resources provided, and we can definitely share that in the email as well within that resource I have there. There's a lot of like people that I follow on YouTube. Like there's this guy called the Money Talk Show, which is literally 2 certified financial planners in the States to talk about the basics of money management, and as well as other Canadian resources I have developed. But most importantly, start with you first.
Great. So thank you everyone for tuning in tonight. Really enjoyed collaborating with Brandon, and I love how you make learning about finances a topic that is often very complicated. You really help demystify it and simplify it and make it a lot of fun to learn. So thank you, Brandon.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.